My family called me a failure at my nephew's college graduation, whispering about how I'd wasted my life while he achieved something meaningful. I sat in the bleachers watching my brother's son receive his diploma, surrounded by relatives who treated me like the family embarrassment, until a military helicopter landed on the graduation field. An agent in a black suit ran straight to me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "General Rodriguez, it's time." My name is Commander Elena Rodriguez, and for 12 years, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I let my family believe I was their greatest disappointment instead of the most classified military officer in American Special Operations. How, Tuss? The Rodriguez family has always been about achievement and success. We're a family of doctors, lawyers, engineers, and business owners who measure worth by visible accomplishments and public recognition. My father, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, is a renowned cardiac surgeon. My mother, Professor Carmen Rodriguez, chairs the psychology department at UCLA. My older brother, Antonio, built a multi-million-dollar tech company from the ground up. My younger sister, Isabella, became the youngest partner at her law firm before turning 30. My brother Marcus, whose son was graduating today, runs a successful architectural firm that's designed buildings across 3 states. Even my cousins had impressive careers. One's a federal judge, another's a network news anchor, and the third just made partner at Goldman Sachs. Then there's me, the family cautionary tale, the one who couldn't find her direction in life. According to family lore, I'm Elena Rodriguez, the disappointment who never lived up to her potential. The official story is painfully simple. I graduated college with decent grades but no clear career path. I bounced between jobs for a few years, never finding anything that stuck. Eventually, I settled into what everyone assumed was a low-level government administrative position that paid the bills but offered no prestige or advancement opportunities. At family gatherings, I'm introduced with barely concealed embarrassment. This is Elena, our middle daughter. She works for, well, it's some government office. Nothing too exciting. The pause before "nothing too exciting" always hangs in the air like a failed dream. My relatives have learned to change the subject quickly when asked about me. While they proudly discuss Antonio's latest business acquisition or Isabella's high-profile cases, conversations about my life are brief and awkward. "Elena's doing fine," they'll say with forced smiles, then immediately pivot to discussing someone else's achievements. My apartment is modest, my car is older, and my clothes come from department stores rather than boutiques. At family events, I sit quietly while everyone else shares stories of professional triumphs, exotic vacations, and personal milestones. I've become the relative people feel sorry for, the one who just hasn't found her way yet, despite being in her mid-30s. The disappointment in my parents' eyes is particularly hard to bear. They sacrificed so much to give their children opportunities, working extra shifts, and taking on additional responsibilities to pay for our educations. Seeing their investment in me apparently yield so little return has been a source of quiet grief for them both. My siblings try to be supportive, but there's an underlying condescension in their kindness. They invite me to their children's events, out of obligation, rather than genuine desire for my presence. They offer to help me network or find better opportunities, not understanding that my current situation is exactly where I need to be. The truth is, for 12 years I've maintained this carefully constructed persona, because revealing my actual role would compromise operations so classified that discussing them would constitute treason. While my family sees failure, I've been serving my country in ways they could never imagine, in missions they'll never know existed. But today, at my nephew David's college graduation, that meticulously maintained fiction is about to be shattered completely. Because when national security is threatened, maintaining family relationships becomes secondary to protecting American lives. The helicopter that just landed on the graduation field isn't here by accident, and the agent calling me General isn't making a mistake. It's time for Elena Rodriguez to step out of the shadows and into the most critical mission of her career. The secure satellite phone had been silent for 18 months, hidden in a false bottom of my purse like a dormant weapon waiting for activation. I'd almost convinced myself it would never ring again, that my days of classified operations were truly behind me. Then, at 2:17 p.m. on a sunny Saturday afternoon, as my nephew David walked across the graduation stage, it buzzed with the distinctive tone that meant American lives were in immediate danger. I stepped away from my family, moving toward the edge of the bleachers as inconspicuously as possible. The caller ID showed only numbers I recognized as coming from the highest levels of national security. General Rodriguez, the voice belonged to Director Sarah Chen, head of the National Intelligence Coordination Center. We have a code black situation developing. Multiple terrorist cells have infiltrated major American cities with coordinated strike capabilities. Intelligence suggests they're targeting civilian populations during large public gatherings. My blood went cold as I scanned the graduation ceremony around me. Thousands of families celebrating their children's achievements, completely unaware that events like this had become prime targets for coordinated terrorist attacks. "What's our immediate threat assessment?" I asked, automatically slipping into the command voice I'd kept buried for over a year. 7 major cities, simultaneous strikes planned for this weekend. The cells are using communications and tactics that suggest state-sponsored coordination. We're looking at potentially thousands of casualties unless we can neutralize the threat in the next 6 hours. I watched my family cheering as David received his diploma, their faces glowing with pride and joy. They had no idea that their sister, the family disappointment, was about to coordinate a response to prevent mass casualty events across the country. Intel sources? Multiple assets across 3 continents. The chatter increased dramatically in the past 48 hours, all pointing to coordinated strikes on American soil today. "General, we need you to reactivate immediately. You're the only person with comprehensive knowledge of both the terrorist networks and the counter-operations necessary to stop them." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 12 years of hidden service pressing down on me. After my last mission, I'd requested indefinite leave, tired of the isolation, tired of living a lie, tired of watching my family's disappointment grow while I couldn't explain why their love and understanding mattered more to me than they'd ever know. "Ma'am, there's another complication," Director Chen continued. "The terrorist cells appear to be using intelligence gathered about American family gathering patterns. They know that weekends like this, graduation season, family celebrations, create the highest concentration of civilian targets." My nephew was taking photos with his parents now, my brother Marcus beaming with pride. My sister Isabella was recording everything on her phone. My parents sat in the front row, tears of joy streaming down their faces. "Where do you need me?" I asked, already knowing the answer would tear me away from this moment, this brief glimpse of normal family life I'd been cherishing. "Helicopter extraction in 60 seconds. We're setting up a mobile command center at Quantico. You'll be coordinating response teams across all 7 target cities." I looked back at my family one more time. They were still celebrating, completely absorbed in David's achievement. In 60 seconds, everything would change. The sister they pitied for her lack of ambition was about to disappear into a helicopter, leaving them with questions I couldn't answer and a truth I couldn't share. "Understood, Director. Initiating extraction protocol now." I ended the call and watched as a military helicopter appeared on the horizon, growing larger as it approached the graduation field. In moments, Agent Martinez would jump out, run across the field, and call me by my true rank in front of everyone I'd spent 12 years deceiving. The family failure was about to become General Rodriguez once again, and there would be no going back to the comfortable lie I'd been living. The Quantico National Intelligence Coordination Center at 4:30 p.m. on a Saturday operated like a city that never sleeps, but with the focused intensity of a machine processing global threats in real time. Security checkpoints that normally handled hundreds of daily visitors stood nearly empty, manned by guards whose expressions sharpened when they saw my emergency clearance level, ultra-black access at an hour when most Americans were celebrating family milestones, unaware their safety depended on operations like this. I passed through 7 increasingly secure checkpoints, each one granting access to deeper levels of classified operations. My footsteps echoed through corridors lined with reinforced blast doors, each hiding command centers that could coordinate counter-terrorism responses across multiple continents simultaneously. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Strategic Operations Center occupied an entire classified floor, its existence unknown to most government hash. Part 3. Entering the arena, return to her domain. The Quantico National Intelligence Coordination Center at 4:30 p.m. on a Saturday looked like a war room in controlled chaos. Unlike the ceremonial Pentagon briefings politicians see, this facility operated in complete secrecy, housing the most classified counterterrorism operations in American intelligence. Security protocols that normally required weeks of clearance verification were bypassed with emergency authorizations as I was rushed through checkpoint after checkpoint. The helicopter ride had taken 23 minutes, during which Agent Martinez briefed me on threat assessments while I changed from my civilian graduation attire into tactical gear. My family's shocked faces as the helicopter lifted off were burned into my memory, my mother's hand covering her mouth, my father standing frozen, my siblings staring in complete bewilderment as their failure sister disappeared into the sky. When I entered the Strategic Operations Center, the familiar rush of command authority flooded back like muscle memory. This room was my natural habitat. Walls lined with screens displaying real-time intelligence from every major American city, communication feeds crackling with updates from field agents, and the controlled urgency of professionals managing multiple life-or-death situations simultaneously. General Rodriguez, Colonel Williams, my former deputy commander, greeted me with obvious relief. We've confirmed terrorist cells in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Miami, Atlanta, and Seattle. Each cell is targeting major public venues during peak weekend attendance. I studied the tactical displays, my mind automatically processing threat vectors and response scenarios. 18 months away from active duty hadn't dulled my analytical capabilities. If anything, the forced break had given me fresh perspective on counterterrorism strategies. Current threat timeline? Coordinated strikes planned for 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Intelligence suggests they're using social media monitoring to identify events with maximum civilian density. Graduation ceremonies, wedding receptions, sporting events, anything that concentrates families in predictable locations. A chill ran through me as I realized the tactical brilliance of the approach. Terrorists weren't just targeting random civilians. They were specifically hunting American families during their most joyful moments, turning celebrations into tragedies. What's our response capability? 7 rapid response teams positioned in each target city, but they need strategic coordination to avoid civilian casualties while neutralizing the threat. The cells are using communication encryption that only your previous intelligence networks can decode. I moved to my old command terminal, surprised to find my clearance codes still active after 18 months of dormancy. Director Chen appeared beside me as screens came alive with classified intelligence streams. General, I know this reactivation is sudden, but you developed the urban counterterrorism protocols these cells are trying to counter. You created the intelligence networks that identified them, and you trained most of the agents who'll be executing the response. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a familiar uniform. In this room, I wasn't Elena Rodriguez, the family disappointment who couldn't find her career direction. I was General Rodriguez, architect of American urban security, guardian of civilian populations, and coordinator of operations that saved lives on scales my family would never comprehend. Status of embedded assets? Active and awaiting your coordination. We have people inside 3 of the 7 cells, but their covers will be blown the moment we move unless the timing is perfect across all 7 cities. I pulled up communication protocols I'd designed 3 years ago, systems so secure that even accessing them required biometric confirmation from my specific clearance level. Colonel Williams, prepare for simultaneous operations across all 7 target zones. I want communication blackouts established, civilian evacuation routes prepared, and response teams positioned for maximum efficiency with minimum collateral exposure. As my teams scattered to execute orders, I realized that this room, these people, this mission, This was where Elena Rodriguez truly belonged. Not in graduation bleachers watching other people's achievements, but coordinating operations that protected American families from threats they'd never know existed. My family thought they were watching a failure disappear into a helicopter. They had no idea they were witnessing the return of one of America's most effective counterterrorism commanders. 6 hours into the crisis coordination, the secure elevator doors opened with their distinctive chime, and I heard a voice that made my heart stop mid-beat. "I need to speak with General Rodriguez immediately. We have a situation that requires her personal authorization for embedded asset extraction." I turned from my command terminal to see a familiar figure in tactical gear striding across the operations center floor. Agent Sarah Kim, my former field operative who'd worked deep cover assignments in 3 different terrorist organizations. Behind her, looking completely overwhelmed and out of place among the classified terminals and global intelligence feeds, walked my brother Marcus. Marcus's eyes swept the Strategic Operations Center with obvious amazement, rows of ultra-black clearance workstations, wall-mounted screens displaying real-time intelligence from every major American city, uniformed personnel moving with the urgent precision of people managing multiple life-or-death situations. This was his first glimpse into America's true counterterrorism nerve center, and I watched him struggle to comprehend the scope of operations he was witnessing. "General Rodriguez is currently coordinating multi-city response protocols," Colonel Williams intercepted them professionally. "I can arrange a briefing with—" "Colonel, with all due respect," Agent Kim interrupted, "one of our embedded assets has been compromised and is requesting immediate extraction authorization. I need strategic oversight from someone with general-level authority, and I need it now." I stood slowly, knowing that the moment I turned around, 12 years of carefully maintained separation would collapse completely. For over a decade, I'd managed to keep my 2 worlds apart through meticulous operational security and family deception. "Agent Kim," I said, my voice carrying the authority that comes with making decisions that affect national security operations. "I understand we have an asset in immediate danger requiring extraction protocols." Both individuals turned toward me, and I watched recognition hit Agent Kim like a physical shock. Her professional composure cracked as her expression shifted from urgent briefing mode to complete disbelief, then to something approaching reverence. "Holy hell," she whispered, staring at me like I'd materialized from legend. "Elena Rodriguez, you're the Shadow General!" Marcus's head snapped between us, confusion and growing alarm written across his face. "Shadow General! Agent, how do you know my sister?" Agent Kim continued staring, her voice barely controlled with respect. "Know her? Marcus, your sister revolutionized American counterterrorism operations after 9/11. The Shadow General, the invisible commander who redesigned our entire approach to urban threat neutralization." "That's impossible," Marcus said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. "Elena works some boring government administrative job. She couldn't even figure out her career direction. She's been drifting for years." I watched my brother's worldview begin to fracture as Agent Kim shook her head slowly, respectfully. "Marcus, your sister didn't drift anywhere. She was recruited into the most classified counterterrorism position in American intelligence history. Every urban security protocol you've read about, every terrorist attack that didn't happen, she prevented them." The command center had gone noticeably quieter around us, dozens of personnel pretending they weren't witnessing a family revelation with serious national security implications. Marcus stared at me with growing horror and comprehension. "The administrative job story." "Operational cover," I said simply. "I've been a general in special operations for 8 years, Marcus. Before that, I spent 4 years developing the intelligence networks that keep American families safe from threats they'll never know existed." Agent Kim stepped forward, her voice filled with the kind of respect I'd never heard directed toward me by anyone in my family. "Ma'am, I've executed operations you designed. I've got civilians alive today because of protocols you created. It's an honor to finally meet the Shadow General face to face." Marcus looked like someone had just explained that gravity worked in reverse. But we all thought. Everyone said you were failing at life." "I let them believe that," I said quietly, "because the alternative was revealing state secrets that could get American civilians killed, including all of you." The alarm that cut through the Strategic Operations Center wasn't the standard alert. It was the tone reserved for imminent mass casualty events. Marcus jumped at the sharp, urgent sound, but I was already moving toward the main tactical display before the intelligence officer could speak. General Rodriguez, we've intercepted communications indicating the terrorist cells have moved up their timeline, Colonel Williams reported, his voice tight with urgency. They're initiating coordinated strikes in 30 minutes instead of the planned 3 hours. Thousands of civilians are about to be caught in simultaneous attacks across 7 cities. Marcus stared at the screens showing real-time intelligence from major American cities, his face draining of color as he processed the scope of what was unfolding. How is that possible? How can they coordinate something this massive? I studied the intelligence feeds, my mind processing tactical data points that others would miss. 12 years of counterterrorism experience kicked in as I analyzed communication patterns, timing sequences, and attack vectors with the speed that had made me legendary in intelligence circles. They're not just coordinating, I said grimly, they're using our own emergency response patterns against us. Every protocol we have for mass casualty events, they've studied and prepared to exploit. I moved to my command terminal and began accessing systems that made Agent Kim step back involuntarily. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up databases so classified that viewing them without proper authorization carried automatic life imprisonment sentences. Colonel Williams, bring up Operation Urban Shield on screen 4, I ordered. Cross-reference with all public venue security assessments from the past 6 months. Ma'am, those files require general-level clearance. I wrote those protocols, Colonel. Execute the order immediately. As classified data cascaded across multiple screens, patterns emerged that painted a terrifying picture. The terrorist cells hadn't just planned random attacks. They had systematically studied American counter-terrorism responses and designed their operation to maximize casualties while minimizing our ability to respond effectively. There, I pointed to a series of connections others had overlooked. Communication timing from 2 hours ago, venue selection patterns from last week, and emergency response mapping from yesterday. They know exactly how we'll respond to each attack, and they've positioned secondary teams to exploit our predictable deployment patterns. Marcus watched me work with growing amazement, seeing analytical capabilities he'd never imagined his directionless sister possessed. But there wasn't time for family revelations. Thousands of American civilians were about to become casualties unless we completely reimagined our response. Agent Kim, I said, my voice carrying absolute authority, I need you to immediately recall all standard response teams while I redesign the entire operational approach to this threat. Ma'am, with respect, Homeland Security has already approved our deployment strategies. Homeland Security doesn't have access to the threat intelligence I'm analyzing right now, I cut her off. Our response teams are walking into a trap that will result in massive civilian casualties, unless we completely restructure this operation. I turned to the main tactical display, calling up city maps and emergency response scenarios. My hands moved with practiced precision, redesigning counterterrorism tactics, communication protocols, and deployment procedures in real time. New operational parameters. Instead of standard venue-by-venue response, we implement coordinated urban disruption. Team Alpha creates false communication traffic using deception protocols I developed in 2019. Team Bravo positions for simultaneous neutralization using approach vectors that don't appear in any terrorist planning model. I continued for 40 minutes, completely restructuring a 7-city counterterrorism operation while Marcus watched in stunned silence. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. This was practical expertise born from 12 years of designing operations that saved American lives from threats most people never knew existed. The terrorists expect predictable American responses because they've studied our standard protocols, I explained, adjusting final operational details. Instead, we use modified urban warfare tactics they've never encountered, turning their intelligence advantage into our operational superiority. When I finished, Agent Kim stared at the revised operation plan with obvious respect. Ma'am, this is brilliant. You've transformed their coordinated attack into our counterintelligence victory. Marcus looked at me like he was seeing a complete stranger. How do you just redesign an entire counterterrorism operation from memory? I met his eyes directly. Because I've been doing this every day for 12 years, Marcus. While you thought I was failing at life, I was designing the systems that kept American families like ours safe from threats they'll never know existed. After Agent Kim left to coordinate the revised counterterrorism operation, Marcus and I found ourselves alone in my private briefing room adjacent to the Strategic Operations Center. He sat across from my desk, staring at classified documents bearing my signature, my tactical analyses, my handwritten notes on decisions that had shaped American urban security for over a decade. "I need to understand something," he said finally, his voice small and confused. "If you've been this all these years, why did you let us believe you were failing at life? Why did you let the family think you'd wasted your potential?" I looked at my brother, really looked at him, for the first time in years without the careful emotional distance I'd maintained to protect operational security. He was 42 now, a successful architect with 3 children and a beautiful life, but sitting in my classified briefing room, he looked like the confused younger brother who'd asked why I never attended his wedding, why I missed his children's birthdays, why I always seemed distant during family gatherings. "Because the truth would have gotten people killed," I said quietly, "including David." I pulled out a classified file from my secured drawer, one that even Agent Kim lacked clearance to access. Inside were photographs, mission reports, and intelligence assessments from my early years in counterterrorism operations. This is Operation Silent Watch 2017, 4 years after I supposedly started drifting through meaningless jobs. I slid a photograph across the desk. That's me with an urban surveillance team in Chicago, developing intelligence networks that would eventually prevent a coordinated attack on multiple college campuses. Marcus stared at the photo of a woman in tactical surveillance gear, face partially obscured by monitoring equipment, but unmistakably me. Younger, harder, carrying herself with the deadly confidence of someone making life-and-death decisions in urban environments. But we all thought, everyone said you couldn't find your direction. I had found my direction, I admitted, pulling out another file. But it came with an impossible cost. I opened the folder to reveal a mission report dated September 23, 2018. Marcus leaned forward, reading the classified details of a counterterrorism operation in Los Angeles. I was running a deep cover operation tracking domestic terrorist cells planning attacks on family gathering venues when I received actionable intelligence about a planned bombing at a college graduation ceremony, I said, my voice steady despite the memories tearing through me like shrapnel. "The graduation ceremony where your son David was receiving his bachelor's degree." Marcus's eyes widened in horror. His son David, now 26, and working as a software engineer, completely unaware of how close he'd come to being a casualty. The intelligence was solid, but acting on it would have blown my cover and compromised 18 months of infiltration work that had identified 7 domestic terror cells planning coordinated attacks on American families. I had to choose: save David's graduation or protect an operation that could prevent hundreds of future casualties. I pulled out the final document, an after-action report written in my own hand, every word seared into my memory like a brand. I chose the mission. I let David's graduation proceed while coordinating a response that would neutralize the threat without revealing my presence. The bomb was found and disabled with 6 minutes to spare. David never knew his aunt had spent the entire ceremony in tactical gear, coordinating with bomb disposal units to keep him alive. Marcus's face had gone completely white. You were there? You saved David's life while we thought you were too irresponsible to even attend family events? That's when I realized I could never have both, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. Every family celebration became a potential target because of the work I do. Every time I got close to any of you, I put you in danger. So I stepped back, let you all believe I was failing, because keeping you safe meant keeping my distance. I closed the files and looked directly at my brother. Every family gathering where you all talked about success and achievement, I sat there knowing I'd spent my career preventing attacks on events exactly like ours. Every time someone said I'd wasted my potential, I accepted it because the alternative was explaining that your sister's job was keeping American families alive by staying away from her own. Marcus stared at me with tears in his eyes. All these years, you've been protecting us by letting us think you'd failed. It's not protection, Marcus. It's the cost of this work. Some people serve by being present, others serve by staying in the shadows. 5 days after the successful neutralization of all 7 terrorist cells, resulting in 0 civilian casualties and the arrest of 34 operatives, Marcus returned to Quantico with questions that had consumed him during the entire crisis aftermath. "I need to see everything," he said, entering my office with the determined stride of someone who'd made a decision. "Every file, every operation, every piece of evidence that proves what you've actually been doing for 12 years. I hesitated. "Marcus, some of this information could compromise ongoing." "Could compromise what? Me?" "Elena, I just watched you coordinate the prevention of mass casualty events across 7 cities. I think I can handle learning the truth about my own sister." I opened my ultra-black database and began accessing files. 12 years of classified operations, strategic assessments, and counter-terrorism reports that bore my digital signature. As the documents populated across multiple screens, Marcus pulled his chair closer, studying each one with the analytical mind of a trained professional. "This urban security doctrine from 2015, he said, pointing at a classified manual. "This is what they reference in all the Homeland Security briefings I've attended for my architectural projects. The Rodriguez Protocol for Venue Threat Assessment. Named after the family that developed it," I said quietly. His eyes widened as understanding hit him. "But in all the documentation, it says developed by Dr. Miguel Rodriguez and Federal Security Assessment Division. It credits Dad with creating these protocols." I pulled up the original files, showing timestamps and digital signatures proving the protocols originated from my terminal, my analysis, my strategic framework. "Your father provided medical expertise on casualty assessment and trauma response patterns. But the core security architecture came from me." Marcus's face went pale as he scrolled through document after document showing the same systematic pattern. My innovations credited to our father. My strategic breakthroughs published under his name. My revolutionary approaches to urban security attributed to Federal Security Assessment Division, rather than their actual architect. "This can't be right," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad's the most ethical person I know. He wouldn't steal credit for your work." I opened another classified file, email correspondence between my father and Homeland Security publishing officials from 2016. Marcus read over my shoulder as the truth unfolded in cold, bureaucratic language. "Classification requirements necessitate attributing security innovations to Dr. Rodriguez, rather than the actual author to maintain operational security," he read aloud. "Publication under real author's name would compromise active counterterrorism operations." The emails continued, showing how my father had initially protested taking credit for work that wasn't his, but eventually agreed when told it was essential for national security and my personal safety. "He was protecting you," Marcus said, but his voice sounded hollow. "Initially, yes," I replied, accessing more recent files, "but look at these." I showed him documents from 2021, long after the original security concerns had been resolved. My father was still accepting recognition for security innovations I developed, still consulting on homeland security matters using my classified research, still building his post-retirement reputation on my invisible contributions. "The Rodriguez Doctrine for Modern Urban Security," Marcus read from a prestigious Security Journal article. By Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, M.D. Jesus, Elena. This entire article is just a summary of your classified security frameworks. I pulled up the original strategic assessments I'd written, showing how my father had essentially repackaged my work for public consumption while I remained buried under classification restrictions that prevented me from claiming authorship. "Here's what really bothers me," I said, opening a file that made Marcus gasp. Last month, he submitted a proposal to the Department of Homeland Security for a new urban security initiative. Look familiar? The proposal was nearly identical to a classified strategic plan I'd submitted 8 months earlier. My father was now actively competing with me for security contracts, using my own innovations against me without knowing it. "He doesn't even realize you're a general," Marcus said, the full scope of the deception hitting him. "He thinks he's outsmarting some anonymous federal security analyst." The man who thinks I've wasted my potential has built his entire post-retirement consulting career on work I did while he believed I was drifting through meaningless government jobs. Marcus insisted on being present when I confronted our father. He'd spent 6 days analyzing the evidence, cross-referencing publications with my classified work, documenting 12 years of systematic intellectual theft. The architect in him demanded structural integrity, and he'd found nothing but lies holding up our father's reputation. "This isn't just about family anymore," he'd said with steel in his voice. "This is about honor, about stolen valor, about truth." We arranged to meet Dad at his Beverly Hills consulting office, where he advised corporations and government agencies on security matters, using expertise that was fundamentally mine. Walking into that building felt like entering a shrine to my stolen legacy, every medical diploma and security certificate representing evidence of systematic deception. Dad looked genuinely shocked to see us together. Since the helicopter incident at David's graduation, our entire family had been asking questions he couldn't answer. He stood behind his mahogany desk, surrounded by awards and recognition plaques, including several honoring him as the pioneer of modern urban security assessment. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, his voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone. "I've been trying to reach Elena since that incident at the graduation." "What exactly?" "We know," Marcus cut him off, his voice flat and unforgiving. He dropped a thick folder on the desk. "We know everything you've stolen." Dad's expression shifted from confusion to mounting panic. He opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning documents that Marcus had meticulously compiled, publication records, email correspondence, strategic assessments showing decades of plagiarism. "I don't understand what this is supposed to prove," he said, but sweat had begun forming on his forehead. "It proves you've built your entire post-retirement career on Elena's work," Marcus said bluntly. "Every award on this wall, every article bearing your name, every consulting contract, all based on counterterrorism strategies created by the daughter you thought was failing at life." Dad's face went ashen as the evidence mounted before him, page after page of undeniable proof that his reputation was built on lies. "This is classified information," he said weakly. "How could you possibly? How could I access classified counterterrorism assessments?" I spoke for the first time, my voice cold as steel. "Because I wrote them, Dad. Every strategic framework, every security protocol, every innovation you've claimed as your own." I stood and walked to his wall of achievements, stopping at a plaque reading, "Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, Architect of Modern Urban Security." "This security doctrine you're famous for? I designed it in 2016 while you thought I was shuffling paperwork. These venue assessment protocols? Created by me while you told people I couldn't find my direction in life." Dad collapsed into his chair, the weight of exposure crushing him completely. "You don't understand," he said desperately. "They told me it was for operational security. Publishing under your name would compromise missions." "That excuse expired years ago," Marcus interrupted harshly. "What's your justification for continuing to steal her work when there was no security risk?" Dad looked between us, cornered. I believed I was preserving our family's contributions to national security. When they said Elena's work had to stay classified, I thought someone should get credit for Rodriguez family achievements. "So you chose yourself," I said quietly. "You let your daughter believe she was a failure while building your reputation on her genius." "I didn't know you were—" He stopped, realization hitting him like a physical blow. "My God, Elena, you're telling me you're—" "A general in special operations," I finished. "The strategist whose work you've plagiarized. The architect of every protocol you've claimed as your innovation." Silence filled the room. Dad stared at me like seeing a stranger. "All these years," he whispered, "when I worried about your future, criticized your choices. You were talking to one of the highest-ranking counterterrorism officers in America," I said, "the person keeping families like ours safe, including yours." The truth hung between us, 12 years of deception finally exposed. The decision to reveal my identity publicly came after sleepless nights wrestling with 12 years of ingrained secrecy. Marcus had been relentless in his arguments. "The classified operations stay buried, but your contributions to national security deserve recognition." You've let Dad steal valor while hiding in shadows you created to protect everyone else. The venue was the National Security Innovation Summit. 600 government officials, defense contractors, and security journalists gathered to discuss the future of American homeland security. Dad was scheduled as the featured speaker, presenting on Evolution of Urban Security, 12 Years of Strategic Innovation. I sat in the back row, wearing my dress uniform publicly for the first time in 12 years. The weight of my general insignia felt strange after years of civilian disguises, but the stars on my shoulders carried authority that couldn't be hidden anymore. Dad approached the podium with confidence built on years of accepting praise for work that wasn't his. He began by displaying a slide titled, "The Rodriguez Legacy, 12 Years of Security Innovation." "Fellow security professionals," he said, his voice carrying through the auditorium, "today I want to share the evolution of strategic thinking that has fundamentally transformed how we approach urban threat assessment in the 21st century." He advanced to the next slide, showing venue security protocols I'd developed in 2018. He spoke authoritatively about strategic decisions he'd never made, threat assessments he'd never conducted, counterterrorism operations he'd never commanded. I waited until he was 30 minutes into his presentation, explaining security strategies to an audience that included officials who'd implemented those exact procedures to prevent terrorist attacks nationwide. Then I stood. The movement caught Agent Kim's attention first. She was sitting 12 rows ahead, and when she turned to see who was disrupting the presentation, recognition hit her like lightning. "Holy hell," she whispered, loud enough for nearby officials to hear. "That's General Rodriguez." The whisper spread outward like ripples from a stone. More heads turned. More voices murmured. The audience's attention shifted from the speaker to the woman in uniform standing at the back. Dad noticed the disturbance and paused mid-sentence, squinting against stage lights to identify the source of commotion. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's acoustics. "But there's been a significant misattribution of authorship in this presentation." Complete silence fell over the room. Dad's face went white as he recognized my voice, then my uniform, then the devastating implications of my presence. Agent Kim stood, snapping to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "General Elena Rodriguez, United States Special Operations Command." The auditorium erupted. Officials scrambled to their feet, some saluting, others applauding, most staring in shocked recognition. Security journalists began photographing what they realized was unprecedented. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in sudden quiet. When I reached the stage, Dad stood frozen behind the podium, staring at me like I was materializing from his worst nightmare. "Dr. Rodriguez," I said formally, using his title instead of Dad. "The security innovations you're presenting were developed under my direct command between 2012 and 2024. The urban threat assessment protocols, the venue security frameworks, the counterterrorism response systems, all originated from classified special operations strategic analysis under my signature." I turned to address the audience directly. For 12 years, classification requirements prevented me from claiming credit for security work that required absolute secrecy. However, the doctrines being presented have been declassified for training purposes. The original architect was not Dr. Miguel Rodriguez. The auditorium remained silent, 600 security professionals processing implications. The original architect was General Elena Rodriguez, the woman this family believed was failing at life. The applause that followed was thunderous recognition of truth, finally revealed. Officials who'd studied my tactics, who'd prevented attacks using my strategies, who'd built their careers on doctrine I'd created, finally knew who had kept America safe. Dad stepped away from the podium, his presentation forgotten, his reputation crumbling in real time. But for the first time in 12 years, I stood not as a family failure, but as the architect of American urban security. 8 months after the National Security Innovation Summit, I stood in Quantico's Strategic Operations Center, preparing for what would become the Rodriguez Family Integration Protocol, a classified program where Marcus would officially join my strategic assessment team as a civilian architectural consultant specializing in venue security analysis. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 12 years, I'd worked to keep my family separated from my professional world. Now, Marcus's architectural expertise and structural knowledge had proven invaluable in bridging theoretical security concepts with real-world venue vulnerabilities. General Rodriguez, Colonel Williams announced. Mr. Rodriguez has arrived for the strategic briefing. Marcus entered in business attire, but his demeanor had transformed completely. Gone was the unconscious pity he'd once shown toward his supposedly directionless sister. In its place stood the respectful professional relationship between two experts who'd earned mutual trust through shared dedication to protecting American lives. "Ma'am," he said formally, then smiled. "Ready to revolutionize American venue security?" We'd spent recent months collaborating on something unprecedented, a comprehensive overhaul of urban security doctrine that incorporated lessons from 12 years of classified operations. Marcus's architectural experience provided crucial insights into how theoretical security frameworks actually performed in real building environments. Before beginning our briefing, I activated the secure communication system. The screen revealed Isabella calling from her law firm, Antonio from his tech company, and surprisingly, Dad appearing from his restructured medical consulting practice. "Little sister," Isabella said, grinning through the screen. Or should I say General? I'm still adjusting to the fact that my sister has been running American counterterrorism while I thought she was processing paperwork. The healing with Isabella had been profound. When she learned about the personal sacrifices I'd made to protect our family, she'd been quiet for hours. Finally, she'd said something that still moved me. "You chose to serve in silence while we served in spotlight. Both matter, but yours required more courage." Dad appeared smaller on screen, humbled but determined. After the public revelation, he'd faced immediate professional consequences. Several consulting contracts were terminated when clients realized his expertise was borrowed. But rather than destroying him completely, Marcus and I had worked to find a path that preserved dignity while acknowledging truth. "The new role is challenging," Dad reported quietly. "Instead of claiming credit for security innovations, I'm focusing on medical response planning for mass casualty events using my actual expertise. It's honest work that draws on what I genuinely know." More importantly, he'd begun acknowledging his actions. "The hardest part," he'd admitted during one painful conversation, "was realizing I'd worried about my daughter's future while she was securing America's future." Antonio pulled out a leather portfolio. "I've been working with security historians to document the real Rodriguez family story. Not the fabricated version, but the truth about how national security actually develops." The book's working title, Isabella added with a grin, is The Shadow General: How America's Most Classified Officer Served in Silence. I smiled. "How about something simpler? Maybe Service Beyond Recognition, a family's hidden story. Because that's what this has always been about. Finding ways to serve something greater than personal achievement." The briefing that followed was unlike any I'd conducted. Instead of working in isolation, making strategic decisions implemented by strangers, I collaborated with family members who understood both the human cost of security work and the necessity of difficult choices. As we analyzed complex scenarios involving venue security, urban threats, and family protection protocols, I realized the 12 years of separation hadn't been wasted. Marcus brought architectural perspectives I couldn't gain in command centers. Isabella offered legal frameworks I'd never considered. Even Dad's medical consulting provided practical knowledge about casualty response that enhanced our security planning. We were stronger together than any of us had been apart. When the briefing concluded, Marcus and I walked through Quantico corridors toward the exit. These halls no longer felt like places where I hid from family. They felt like spaces where I could finally serve alongside them. "You know," Marcus said as we approached the parking area, "I used to think success meant building impressive structures. Now I think it might be building security that nobody sees but everyone depends on." I looked at my brother, Marcus Rodriguez, architect, security consultant, and finally, truly, family, and smiled. That's what real service looks like. My name is General Elena Rodriguez, and I am no longer a failure. I am simply a woman who found her own way to serve with honor. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.